Today, I'll be going over my top digital shading tips and techniques that drastically improved my art. I'll show you how I choose shadow colors for realistic shading, techniques for blending, and rendering tips for shiny surfaces like metal and hair. So when you are shading in anything, your shadow color will be the complementary color of the light. Oh, on the RGB color wheel. So no, not the color wheel that you learn in school, but the color wheel that you see on your digital canvas. If you look over here, you are working with an RGB color wheel. Notice that yellow and red and blue are in off-kilter places. This is because this is a completely different color wheel than what you're used to seeing. When we are working with light's primary colors are now red, green, and blue. Those are your new primary colors. So let's say if you have like a yellow light, kind of an orangey yellow light, your shadow color will be like a blue cyan. Let me put this wheel back. Let's shade in something real quick. Let's say I wanted to make my light kind of a yellowish color. I would change my layer type to soft light. You can use hard light if you so choose. It really does not matter. It's just whatever effect you want later on. So my light color is a yellow. What I'm gonna do, based off of the color that I've chosen here, I'm gonna go across my color wheel, find this color. This will now be the color of my shadow. And that's the realistic shadow that I would pick with a multiply layer. You can change your color wheel usually. Like over here, I can change this to a hue cube, I think. Where is my hue? Can I not change this to a hue? I know I can. Come on now. Yeah, some people have the hue cube. I have this on Photoshop, so I've got a bar and a hue cube. The main things you want to know, though, are that your primary colors are red, green, and blue. Your secondary colors are yellow, magenta, and cyan. That's for your RGB color wheel. If you have no idea what I'm talking about with all this RGB and RYB color wheel stuff, here's a link to a video that explains it in far more detail. I could do this with other colors. Let's create a new sphere. Let's say my light color was cold this time, right? I had a nice bright teal. Again, go across, and this would be my shadow color. And that's a good way for you to kind of check to see that your shadow colors are correct. That's like the main thing that I wish I knew. So number 2, the second shading tip that I wish I knew. So realistic rendering is a blend of soft and cell shading, not one or the other. A lot of people will mess this up. They'll go like, oh, realistic rendering is all soft shading. Not necessarily true. So usually it's better if you have a blend of the two, and it makes things look a lot better. Let's say I had like one cylinder here, and then if I had another cylinder here. This is not going to be perfect because I am rushing. So do not mind me. Let's say that I've got like my light source coming from up top here. Our general shadows, right, because it's coming from up here. We have a shadow going here because it's overlapping with this one. We have another shadow curving around here on this cylinder. And there's also more shadow on the back of this cylinder. We've also got shadow on this side. And this shadow would be kind of like that. So with this cylinder, it's rounded, so we're gonna soft shade this one in. It'd be like the core shadow kind of right here. Maybe a little bit of bounce down here, so it's not perfectly black all the way around. But because this shadow is immediately hitting this cylinder right here, my shadow remains very, very sharp. This edge will remain completely sharp. And as it gets further away, that's when it starts to become softer. As it hits this edge immediately, it remains completely sharp, but as it gets further away, it stops being quite as sharp. So notice how much nicer that looks. If I was to make all of this completely soft, I can do that, but it looks a lot more hefty, a lot more realistic when we have a section that is sharp and cell shaded, and then it fades into a soft shade. So usually a more realistic shading method uses a blend of the two by comparison to one or the other. Even the cast shadow down here, right, as it starts underneath here, it'll be nice and sharp as it is immediately hitting the object. And as it gets farther away, it'll start becoming a lot softer. But soft shading or realistic blending does not necessarily mean everything has to be soft. You don't pick one or the other, you use both. That doesn't look perfect because it's rushed, but don't worry about it. So metal. Shinier it is, the less you'll blend. And gold is warm. I'm just gonna throw that in there. So let's render some gold for a second. Let's start with a dull gold bulb. So let's say we wanted to shade this really nice. It's gold, but it's a little dull. It's still gonna be, you know, very reflective because it's a metal, right? It's gonna be pretty reflective, but it's not gonna be as reflective as if it was super shiny. So there is still gonna be some blending in these shadows. Gold shadows, if you're coloring in any kind of gold, these shadows are gonna be intensely warm. So make sure that you are hue shifting while you are choosing your shadow colors. And let's say that there's like the sky below us. It's gonna be some bounce light down here. Yeah, but let's say that this metal is kind of dull, so it's gonna be blended in a little bit more. But if not, if this is a really, really shiny gold, It's going to be blended in a lot less. There's still going to be like a minor bit of blending, but it's going to be like very, very small amounts. Anything that is shinier, this includes metal, jewelry, glass, eyes, like anything that's wet or shiny, this shading technique holds true. It's exactly the same. All right, so it's going to be a little bit shinier. That isn't amazing, but let me just show you a different one where I did do okay. So if you kind of notice, everywhere that is nice and shiny, these shading techniques, again, zoomed out, looks very, very shiny. Zoom in, very little has been done here. So you notice how concentrated these shadows are by comparison to the green areas where a little bit more dull. So it's a little bit more blended there, but the edges that have gold, right? These are a lot more sharp. This one's also got some gold in it. You can see the shinier bits from farther away. It really is not rendered in. It's nice and sharp. This entire piece is very, very cel shaded, but you notice how like layered the gold sections are. Very layered, very sharp. Not a lot of blending going on in there. The highlight intensity is very, very bright. The low light intensity is very bright. The bounce light is very obvious. Fur and hair. The hair holds a similar technique to metal. The more shiny it is, the less you need to blend. Let's draw a really quick head. So we'll start off with a really shiny hair first.
If you'd like to support the channel and the creation of free arts education, become a member on Patreon.
So let's say I had something like this. This hair is really, really shiny. Let's say if I wanted like some shadow in here. We'll do the cel shaded one first. Right, we can have a little bit of shadow on the bottom. And then you can add a nice, just kind of sharp highlight to the top, kind of around where the light source would be coming from. How do I highlight hair? I just choose a lighter color that's slightly hue shifted. Here's my thing. I have no consistent style for how I highlight my hair. So like this shape is one that I learned from another artist, is this kind of like funky shape that goes like that. Sometimes I do like big blocky shapes like this. Sometimes I just do little lines like this if I'm trying to be quick. I have no consistency. But usually it's better if you just have small concentrated areas. But let's say I blend it in, right? I still want to blend this in, but not as much, right? It's still shiny. You can still tell that it's shiny. And I'm blending it, but not so much to the point where that gradient is crazy. Just blending it in enough.
Join a virtual class to learn live from our professional artists. Get creative assignments, individual guidance, and real-time feedback on your artwork. Start today and level up your practice. If you learned something new, like and share this with a fellow art nerd. If you love receiving quality and free arts education, subscribe. Here's a couple other videos you can check out next.